Thou hast asked me concerning the state of the soul after its separation from the body. Know thou of a truth that if the soul of man hath walked in the ways of God, it will assuredly return and be gathered to the glory of the Beloved. By the righteousness of God, it shall attain a station such as no pen can depict or tongue describe. The soul that hath remained faithful to the cause of God and stood unwaveringly firm in his path shall, after his ascension, be possessed of such power that all the worlds which the Almighty hath created can benefit through him. I think we need that one again. The soul that hath remained faithful to the cause of God and stood unwaveringly firm in his path shall, after his ascension, be possessed of such power that all the worlds which the Almighty hath created can benefit through him. Such a soul provideth at the bidding of the ideal King and divine Educator the pure leaven that leaveneth the world of being, and furnisheth the power through which the arts and wonders of the world are made manifest. Consider how meal needeth leaven to be leavened with. These souls that are the symbols of detachment are the leaven of the world. Meditate on this and be of the thankful.
Friends, we have, through passages such as this, insights into the next world that have never been set forth by the divine messengers in the past. They're brief references, but nothing like this, such detail that Baha'u'llah gives us. Still, he tells us that the faculty that we have as part of our nature to enjoy the next world is not awakened and active in this life. Occasionally people see a snippet of it, sometimes a momentary vision of someone who's passed. But this is more the exception than the rule. The rule is that we're veiled from that world, and we give our services here, and we aim our devotions at these conditions of the soul that we need in order to prepare us for that. And service is the key to the whole thing. He who serves most is nearest to God. Now, one of the things that we see there is this spiritual association of the loved ones in the next world, that we have the pleasure of the company, attaining to the company of sanctified souls. And we'll refer a little later to the extraordinary hierarchy that exists in that world. Dunbar talks about how in this world, just in your own body, you can see all the parts of your body are parts of your body, but the fingernail is quite different from the pupil of the eye and performs a different kind of a function. And so likewise, he said, the souls will, like the cells of a body, will have their position in the next world, their functions and their activities in accordance with their capacity, in accordance with their achievements and services in this life. He talks about the wonder of witnessing the reality of every sanctified soul. Earlier we were talking about how each of us is a unique expression of the names and attributes of God in potentia. It can be developed. We're not always shining. Not all the people are shining with the names and attributes that are their essential nature, but they're there and they can come out. And it's interesting how people say, and you hear the youth say that everybody wants to not follow religion, because you follow religion, it's like sheep, all the sheep running the same way, doing the same thing. Actually, it's just the opposite in true religion. True religion develops your individuality as nothing else does. Certainly, it's far beyond keeping football scores and wearing the same label on the back of your pants and all these things that people consider what make them unique. It doesn't make them unique at all. That's the sheep crowd. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but you want to focus on the question of the qualities and character of the people. This is the thing that's unique. And in the next world, when they're shining with that, it's as if it gives you each one of these souls, these great souls. And I think that those of you who may have had the privilege of meeting some of the Hands of the Cause has some feeling for this, because you see it living before your eyes, that kind of dedicated service and confirmation, divine confirmation. It attracts you, it stirs you, it encourages you to try to aim in that direction. So in the next world, we'll be able to meet these souls and converse with them and witness the reality of light shining in them, which will give us, like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, another facet of the divinity itself, of the greatness of Baha'u'llah, shining through different souls with different qualities. We are told we'll attain to the knowledge of divine mysteries. There, the things that are hidden from our eyes here, they will become clear. The mysteries of existence, the significance of suffering in this life, all these things will become unfolded and obvious to us in the next world. This is an important stage. In that connection, traveling with the Hand of the Cause, Mr. Olinga, in South America, I had the privilege of one period as a counselor to be with him for about 3 months. And of course, we had all kinds of quiet moments and border experiences and every other thing you can imagine. But he took it all very well. He wasn't too pleased in Chile, where in southern Chile there are no blacks. And the village people had a tradition that said that if you see a black person, pinch them, you'll have good luck. And we had a crowd of 300 people at a theater where he was giving a talk, and afterwards everybody wanted their pinch. And he said to me, "Get me out of here before they pulled me apart." I remember. Anyway, in the course of these travels, he talked some of his experiences of pioneering. You know, he was one of the early Baha'is in Uganda, and attracted to the faith through the Bananis and Ali Naqshbandi. And after, when that was during the 2-year African campaign, 51 to 53. After that, the Guardian raised the call for Knights of Baha'u'llah to arise, for people to arise and open all the virgin territories. Mr. Olinga and several of the Africans of Uganda, just brand new Baha'is, went off to West Africa to open the countries of West Africa to the faith. And Mr. Olinga opened Cameroon, which was a combination French and British colony. And in the course of that, he of course suffered greatly for the cause. He became quite well known as a Baha'i teacher in British Cameroon. And he told me that the church, the Anglican Church of England, of course, was very anxious to contain his activities. And so he had lots of difficulties from some of the local people and from the preachers and so on, as I think many of the pioneers who went out in that period did. But he said, you know, I had such wonderful confirmations. I would go back to my little small lodging, my room, exhausted at the end of the day, and I'd fall asleep. And he said, I can tell you, night after night, I had extraordinary experience. He said that 2 luminous beings would come in the room and they'd say, it's time for us to go. And they would take me to a tube of light, and we would ascend up this tube of light, passing various levels, floors of the other kingdom, so to speak. And then we'd come out into one of these worlds. And they'd take me to a stadium where luminous souls were all seated with great focus and attention on the center of the stadium. And at the center of the stadium, he said, they didn't take me to sit down. I stood in the back, but we looked at this. We looked at these scenes. He said those, in the center of that was fountains of colored lights that would pulse. And with every pulsing, you would learn a new divine mystery. You would get insight into some divine understanding. Well, he had to pick me up off the floor after explaining all of that. But, you know, I've been a pioneer too, but I didn't get any of those side trips that I recall. He said that when he had the privilege of going on pilgrimage to Haifa. This is, of course, before he was a hand of the cause. He was a knight of Baha'u'llah. He went to the presence of the guardian. And the guardian, he said there were some Western pilgrims there, but the guardian classified me as an Eastern pilgrim and put me in the Eastern pilgrim house up on the mountain, the pilgrim house that's closest to the shrine, and assigned Lotfullah Hakim to take care of me up there. There were no Eastern pilgrims at the time. So he prepared my food and we were there. But the question is that the guardian for the Eastern pilgrims, for the men, he came up the mountain by car, and then he would meet the pilgrims at the front of the pilgrim house and walk with them in the gardens and take them personally to the shrines and speak to them about the cause. And he said Shoghi Effendi came day after day and took me there. And Ruhiya Khanum confirmed that to something quite out of the ordinary. She said Shoghi Effendi would invite Enoch Olinga to come to the house in the morning, to the master's house. And he would sit there several hours and speak with him. And Mr. Olinga, he did this with modesty, he said, Shoghi Effendi taught me all things. I've never heard of a pilgrimage in the guardian's time with any equivalence to what happened to Enoch Olinga. The guardian, recreated him, so to speak, raised him up, and he must have seen that he had the potential to be the first and only African hand of the cause in Africa. Through this is, again, a question of approaching the divine mysteries. Of course, we can drink of some of this through the verses of God. Both the Bab and Baha'u'llah talk to us about the surface meaning, the immediate meaning of the verses of God. But then he says that each one of these verses, each one of these words, the Bab tells us, each one of the letters of the words of the verses are filled with oceans of divine significances and gushing with the waters of the other world, if we but had the sensitivity to understand and approach it. And then he says those meanings that I'm talking about here, multiple meanings of the verse, he said those meanings have inner meanings, also of an infinite nature. Then he says those inner meanings have secret meanings inside of them. Then he said those have esoteric meanings within them, and those within them have secret and visible esoteric meanings beyond those previous four stages. And at the end of the fifth stage, he's describing of penetrating and gathering these gems of divine knowledge from the verses. He says, and so forth. It just goes on and on and on. Now he talks about the perception of the verses varying at the level of the individual soul's ascendancy. So you have, first they see with the eye of the outer body. They learn truths, they understand things from that. Then they have the eye of the spirit that opens, that gives them added insight. And I think this is closely related to the introduction of the spirit of faith that we were talking about. The breath of the Holy Spirit acting in the soul of the individual gives it perceptions that it would otherwise not have with just the outer eye. Then it has an inner eye. The eye of the spirit. Then he talks about the eye of the intellect, which is even higher, which is this ray of the divine mind that shines into the soul and gives it capacity to see things that it could never see otherwise. And of course, this capacity has been confirmed in the writings in various ways. And you'll see one of the references in some answered questions. He says that the righteous enjoy this ray, this beam of the divine universal mind that gives them added insight into the reading when they're reading the verses of God, or when they're serving, when they're asking for inspiration. Then he talks about the fourth degree, the Bab talks about, which is that very intimate inner eye of the soul that opens finally and is the final stage. He says the only eye that is able to understand the mysteries of divine unity. And we see so many references to divine unity. What is that all referred to? Over and over it's mentioned. The mysteries of unity, the mysteries of oneness, which actually seem to be two different stages of inner reality rather than just a synonym of the other. And he said this inner eye, for the Persian friends, it's the fuad, the eye of the inner heart. That is the highest level. Now, obviously, as our own ascendancy takes place, our vision then goes out into these endless meanings. At each level, there's different meanings of the verses of God that we're hearing about. I think it's important just to mention this because sometimes we think we know something, and if you hear those two indexes there, you realize, yes, you know something. One thing it tells us is we shouldn't disparage what somebody else makes of the verses of God, because it may well be the level that they're at, that they're seeing these meanings. In one of the tablets, Baha'u'llah interprets the word Israel. He says, in this world it signifies this. In the next world up it signifies this. In the next world up it has these meanings. And in the next world up it has those meanings. In other words, each of the truths that we perceive, each of the hidden words, for example, will have multiple deckings of divine significance. And it gives us a great compassion and understanding that others are free to understand the writings the way they do. We can't enforce our meanings on everybody else, but we also can't say that they're not the right meaning because we already read that verse and we understand it this way. There's different understandings of the same truths. Not that we could get in much arguments about those because we don't spend much time attending to them, but still, you know, some people get the idea they really understand things well. They do, but they understand it for their own stage of development. These clarifications then take place in the next world, we're told. Service to God is obviously possible. You'll remember the phrase from the Tablet of Ahmad about a service in both this world and the world to come. Shoghi Effendi doesn't amplify on that, but he says it means we will have opportunities for service in the next world. We don't progress by free will. It isn't that we don't have free will. We have free will and choice in the next world. We can choose to pray for our loved ones. We can attend to whatever we need to attend to. But we don't ascend in different degrees of spiritual perception by our own efforts, but only by the bounty and grace of God, who is attentive to us and watches us, and just as he does in this world, raises us to new levels of understanding. In one tablet, Abdul says something very interesting about that. And it seems to me it has application to the next world. The next world is a world of light. But the soul will situate itself in a position where it's comfortable, the kind of light that it's used to. If it goes higher, it's not comfortable because it's too much intensity. It's kind of like Abdul says that when God moves us from one stage to a new stage, we may at first believe that we've gone backwards. We were becoming quite mellow and enjoying the spiritual life that we were having, and then suddenly things get bad again. And we see all kinds of shortcomings and difficulties in ourselves and in our relations that we didn't see before. Why is that? He implies it's an intensity of the divine illumination, which reveals to you the state of your own being. And maybe we've been living in a room with all the windows and curtains shut, and in our blind way we grope around and we tidy it up and we order things and we think, oh, the whole thing's well organized now. And then suddenly one of these curtains, a glance of light comes into the room, and we see that what we thought was all right is really a mess. So we begin to fix that, and gradually we open the curtains of our soul, so to speak, and we cleanse ourselves and we prepare ourselves and order the inner realm of our being by stages. And then this new light comes, and again we see more dust that we didn't see the last time. So he moves us. As we get used to the next level, we do have a period of, I think, of rejoicing and gratification to God. But he does develop us through a series of difficulties and calamities, and that's our really blessing of we should thank him. We can also cause difficulties by our own foolishness, but I think God is great and he uses those also. Even one place Abdul Baha says that the mistakes and misstatements of the loved ones, God takes and uses them for his own advantage. He has the capacity to do that. We don't. We make a mistake and we think, oh, I've hurt the cause, I've done. But if we're sincere, he also can use those mistakes for progress. In that sense, one of our early teachers, Jesma Herbert, she was on the first Board for Protection here in the Americas, Auxiliary Board for Protection, in the time of Shoghi Effendi. And she said that you will see that press releases, articles about the faith, denouncing the faith or anything else, all serve good purposes. In a sense, the enemies of the cause are our greatest publicity agents. They have much more power and capacity to diffuse their messages, and they do it. And I remember at the time, just then Shoghi Effendi passed away, and there was an article in the Time magazine. We'd never seen an article in Time magazine about the faith, but here was an article about the time of the passing of the guardian and no successor, all hands down kind of article, describing a little of the history of Baha'u'llah and saying how he had tried to murder his brother in Baghdad, and so, you know, just a little bit of Catholic confusion about the history of the faith coming from the source of Time Life magazine. And aghast at these terrible things. But then it went on to describe the teachings and the unity of mankind and all kinds of wonderful. I went pioneering just after that. And I was being interviewed for a job at the Cultural Center in Nicaragua by an American who was the head of the institute to teach English there. And he asked me what I was doing in Nicaragua. And I said, well, I'd come here to help support the activities of the Baha'i community, of the Baha'i faith here. Oh, he said, I read an article in Time magazine about your religion. He said, the concepts of this unity of mankind attracted me so much. That's so beautiful. Nothing about Baha'u'llah's history. So I remembered the dear words of the auxiliary board member. And you remember that too, because there'll be a series of attacks, waves of attacks in the future on the cause. And you just realize that those are busy awakening souls in ways that we might not be able to do ourselves. The diffusion, one of the important services in the next world is the diffusion of the divine fragrances. And we're told that teachers who are engaged in teaching the cause here, they will have the privilege of doing so in the next world as well. And one of the confirmations on this you'll find in Memorials of the Faithful, where Abdu'l-Baha speaks about one of the early teachers of the cause, and he said, I just had a dream of him. And this teacher was quite portly, and he continued to be portly in the next world, for some of you that are worried about your weight. And, and he had just been on a teaching trip, which Abdu'l-Baha said in the next world is referred to as diffusing the divine fragrances. And he'd gone to a district that he hadn't been to before, and he said the souls were receptive there, it was a wonderful experience, and they had new fruits and delicacies and foods that he'd never seen anywhere before, and he was all excited about it and was telling Abdu'l-Baha about it in the dream. This reveals several things all at once. First of all, that teaching is a regular activity there, and the souls that are below the teachers and so on, they help to raise them up. Everybody will be concerned about that. And then also that there are fruits and foods and delicacies in the next world. And I think it'd be free of indigestion, would be a marvelous boon to us all. We'll have to see. We know there's hills and valleys and mountains and all kinds of... The counterpart, we're told this world is the outer semblance of that world. And that there, all these things have divine significance and meanings. I remember talking to one of the Auntie Claire from Uganda. I visited her once in Kenya. She'd been through terrible difficulties under Idi Amin in Uganda. She had a kindergarten, and she talked about how they'd have to get on the floor when the machine gunning would come with the children under the desks, and just day after day was fighting in the streets and so on. So when I visited her, she said she was a little tired. She was staying with the Olingas, and she said, I've just been in the other world for 3 days. was quite interesting, she said. Beautiful, so beautiful. She said, there you can walk, you walk down this grassy hill and into the river, and you can walk on the bottom of the river, and you see all the jewels and treasures in the river. She said it was wonderful. And I came out of the water, and there were some wonderful luminous beings with a box on the hill. So I walked up to meet them and see them, and they smiled, and I asked them what the box was, and they said, this box contains your good deeds. So they opened the box, and she's just beaming as she's telling me this. She's lying in bed and beaming. And she says, I looked in there. At first I couldn't see anything, and then I saw some little teeny specks of gold here and there in the corners. I said, is that all? And they said, that's it. She said, send me back. I have to do more. And she said, so I came back. Dear Claire Gung, she was a marvelous soul. Okay, let's see. All mansions. Talks about mansions in the next world. We say, oh, these things are all symbolic and who knows what. There are mansions in the next world. And they are to be occupied by the servants of God and the chosen ones of God. One of our dear friends is Ruth Yancey, who became Ruth Pringle, who became a counselor of the cause. She is the only Baha'i I know that went pioneering before being accepted into the faith. She was close to the cause. She sent her letter to be taken in by the local assembly, but it was in the Chicago area, and they were all taken up with the Intercontinental Conference and the call of the Guardian to go out pioneering. And she got up on the platform. They let her go because she was so close to the faith. They let her go to the conference. So she offered to pioneer, and she was on a plane going to Puerto Rico, and she got her membership card after she got to Puerto Rico. Dear soul, African-American Baha'i, a nurse, a very capable woman. So for years she's been serving in Nicaragua and Honduras and Panama and so on. She married there. Now she was named a counselor, and she served on the boards of counselors for several decades. An auxiliary board member was with her. They were traveling in Panama, and she said that this particular morning, Ruth came downstairs, and she said, I had a wonderful dream. And the board member asked her what it was. She said, I was in the other world, and we were walking on this glorious golden street, and there were these mansions on both sides, huge, cool, glorious homes all along the way. She said, and he said, these are occupied by the great servants of God and the teachers of the faith. Oh, she said, I dared to ask him, is there going to be one for me when I go to the next world? And he beamed and smiled, she said, and he said, look at the end of the street. And there were the biggest one of all at the end of the street, this glorious palace. He says, that is reserved for you. 2 weeks later, she passed away. It's hard for us to understand what these things mean because we think of them in terms of time and space. But the reality of it, that we do retain our individuality. We're not like a drop that falls back into this sea of spirit and that's the end of it. Our consciousness is always alive with us. It continues through all the realms of God. The detached souls are the leavens of arts and sciences. We heard that mentioned in the passage that Holly read for us this morning. This is another wonderful service. We hear that also, I was mentioning before, some of the souls serve as angels recording the actions of the people in this world. Others diffuse these inspirations. One of the interesting confirmations of this in history, it'd be good if somebody wrote about it one time, is that major inventions are claimed by different countries all at the same time. We made the first airplane. The Russians say they made the first airplane. Somebody in Eastern Europe says they made the first airplane. It's because when the moment has arrived for the inspiration, it seems to diffuse generally. So great scientific discoveries oftentimes are coming alive all over the world at the same time. It's an interesting thing to think about. We like to claim all these inventions for ourselves, but it's not always the case. We know we're called that the souls in the next world are called upon to pray for us, and we also are asked to pray for them. So prayer is another activity of that. The mediation of the Holy Spirit is there. The influence of souls, the capacity for intercession is in the next world. Those souls can intercede on our behalf. Shoghi Effendi, in this marvelous message he writes at the end of the life of the greatest holy leaf, he calls upon dear blessed Baha'i Khanum to intervene with your brother and your father on behalf of the beleaguered community of the Baha'is in this world. And we can always intuitively, there's a passage cited in the New Era that talks about this, where he says we intuitively are drawn to some sympathetic with some soul that's passed on that we've been close with. And we can turn to them and ask them to pray and offer prayers for us. It's not the same as the Catholic intercession of saints, but it's not very far away either. I mentioned earlier, I wanted to quote this. Know thou that sex, male or female, relates to the exigencies of the physical world and has no relation with the spirit. So these are accidents of this world. Just as you're born this part of the world or another part of the world, you're born female, you're born male. It's interesting to realize this in the hierarchy of services of the faith. You know, somebody asked about women not being on the House of Justice. It's not because of any spiritual incapacity, because the spirit is the same in male and female. But it has to do with the exigencies of this world somehow. We don't know what it is yet. But it's interesting to know. And we see the House of Justice has extolled the hands of the cause as having a higher rank, Shoghi Effendi mentioned this too, than the members of the House of Justice. And amongst them were a number of women and their outstanding services. So this is another argument, at least for ourselves. Maybe the other people say, oh yeah, but there are no hands of the cause now about the House of Justice. But we should understand from a spiritual point of view that women and men have equal opportunities for service in everything except administrative functions in the House of Justice itself. Veiled souls, station of the sanctified. Let's go to that theme for a little bit here. Oh, another subject that's related to this is the relatives of believers and so on. And we're told that, I remember there's a story from Zain al-Mogharabin, who was very saintly amanuensis of Baha'u'llah. You can see his photo in the first volume, Revelation of Baha'u'llah. He looks similar to Abdul Baha. He has this very silky white beard. And he was cheerful in his saintliness, and also because he had this quality, this integrity and the purity that he had, he was known to be able to joke with Baha'u'llah. Now, I don't suggest any of us try this, but he had this intimacy with Baha'u'llah that he was able to tell funny stories and say things that would amuse Baha'u'llah. For instance, one time he'd come and he was having breakfast. Baha'u'llah had invited him to come he'd come to the mansion and come upstairs, and Baha'u'llah was preparing tea. And he had tea, and he had cheese, and he had olives. So he'd offered these to Zain to take, and Zain was drinking his tea and eating the cheese. And Baha'u'llah said, you haven't taken any of the olives. You should serve yourself some olives. He was gracious and didn't say anything. And then again, Baha'u'llah saw, so he says, you're not taking any olives. Oh, they're very good olives. And then Baha'u'llah says, you know, God swore in the Quran by the fig and by the olive. And Zain said, forgive me, Lord, but he swore before he tasted them. Another morning he went and he was having breakfast with Baha'u'llah, and it seems Zain was not in a very good frame of mind, and Baha'u'llah perceived that right away, and he began speaking to him. He said, you know, the station of our wives is very great, very important. We have to care very much for our spouses. We have to be very good to them. Zayn's still looking grave. So Baha'u'llah says, you know, that our spouses will be with us. We'll be with them in the next world, in the heavenly realm. And Zayn says, can you arrange for me to go to the other place? Now, there's something about saints that usually they have very interesting spouses. This goes both ways. Something that helps develop their saintliness, you know? So evidently, Zayn had a wife that was good for that service. Anyhow, the integrity of this man was such that Baha'u'llah wrote a tablet. He said, any verses of my verses that are in the hand of Zayn are authentic and confirmed without seal or signature. You can imagine the integrity, the trust that he had in him. So anyway, about soulmates, we've heard there were teachings. The early American Baha'i community had some ideas about soulmates, and they had asked, the question had arisen, you know, I married this guy, or I married this woman, and later I found my soulmate. Now what do I do now? You know, there was a man that wrote Shoghi Effendi. He said, you know, for years I'd looked for a true love, and I had never found one, but I finally married a wonderful woman, and I'm settled down with her. But now I met the true one that I want to marry. What shall I do? And he said, Shoghi Effendi answered, you should stay with the first one. You know, I know it was such a strange question to ask the guardian. I suppose he thought he was going to let him be a bigamist. The East had some hints of that in the past, you know. So this is a letter from the guardian. He says, there is no teaching in the Baha'i faith that soulmates exist. What is meant is that marriage should lead to a profound friendship of spirit, which will endure in the next world, where there is no sex and no giving and taking in marriage. Just the way we should establish with our parents, our children, our brothers and sisters and friends, deep spiritual bonds, which will be everlasting and not merely physical bonds of human relationships. So you can see in the next world we're going to have a web of connections with those who we're spiritually attracted and connected to, quite irrespective of the question of marriage and the relationships of marriage in this world. One, Abdu'l-Baha says on one occasion, he said, one who is an unbeliever, when he passes away, it's possible through the power of God for him to attain a high station, but he can never do it by himself, as his station is fixed so far as he is concerned. And again, from the guardian, those who have never had an opportunity of hearing of the faith, but who lived good lives, will no doubt be treated with the greatest love and mercy in the next world, and reap their full reward. And again, concerning your question whether a soul can receive knowledge of the truth in the world beyond, such a knowledge is surely possible and is but a sign of the loving mercy of the Almighty. We can, through our prayers, help every soul to gradually attain this high station, even if it has failed to reach it in this world. The progress of the soul does not come to an end with death. It rather starts along a new line. Baha'u'llah teaches that great and far-reaching possibilities await the soul in the other world. Spiritual progress in that realm is infinite, and no man while on this earth can visualize its full power and extent. I already touched upon the question of the Abdu'l-Baha saying that the souls in the next world are quite aware of the souls in this world, particularly of their loved ones. They look after them. If they see them in trouble, they pray for them. They see them in terms of being illumined or being encompassed in shadow and darkness and so on. The question of hierarchy in the next world, we hear references to the Supreme Concourse, and there are some verses that support the idea of the concourse. From Abdu'l-Baha, he says, such men as Mirza Abul Fazl already belong in the divine concourse. All his interests are centered on the spiritual horizon rather than on this transitory phantasmagoria. There's a new name for this world. All his efforts are turned toward the heavenly kingdom. He has no other thought. Such souls are aided by heavenly confirmations. And as he has stated, he's still alive, and he says he already belongs in the Supreme Concourse. He's already part of the Supreme Concourse. Praise be to God, the hosts of the Supreme Concourse secure the victory and power of the kingdom, and are ready to assist and support us. And then another from the Guardian, he talks about the face through whose brightness the concourse on high hath been illumined, referring to the manifestation. The holy realities of the concourse on high, writes Abdu'l-Baha, yearn in this day in the most exalted paradise to return unto this world, so that they may be aided to render some service to the threshold of the Abha beauty, and arise to demonstrate their servitude to his sacred threshold. It also talks about the death of one of the friends. He's been put to death with such cruelty that all created things and the inmates of paradise and the concourse on high wept for him, which gives us the idea of the awareness of the other world, which surrounds this world, he says. They're aware of the different sufferings that are going on, and we don't lose consciousness of that by going to the next world. We don't lose anything by going to the next world except this wretched physical being that gnaws at us and tests us all the time. He talks about the hosts of the Supreme Concourse that are in martial array, poised between earth and heaven, ready to rush to the assistance of those who arise to teach the faith. If one seeks the confirmation of the Holy Spirit, they can find it in rich abundance in the teaching field. The world is seeking as never before, and if the friends will arise with new determination, fully consecrated to the noble task ahead of them, victory after victory will be won for the glorious faith of God. Friends, the cause progresses, Shoghi Effendi told us, on sacrifice. Sacrifice is not doing what we're able to do for the cause. When we do what we're able to do for the cause from a rational, logical point of view, we maintain the cause. But if we wanted to go forward with a new spark, with something that moves the whole engine of the faith, we have to do more than that. We have to go beyond what we thought was the limit we could go. And how often we've been called to that, and we stand at that moment and we try to make a decision. Do I push beyond what I feel I can do? And when we do, we see what terrific powers come into play. This is when gnats become eagles and drops become oceans. It's very important to realize the role of sacrifice and giving up lesser things for the most important things. And part of that, of course, is the sacrifice of our own time, the time we take away from other things, perhaps for study of the cause, as well as the teaching of the faith, so that the quality and effectiveness of our teaching is always enhanced, is always increasing. The hand of the cause, Mr. Qazi told us that when he was called to go on pilgrimage, he and Mr. Khadim, neither of them hands of the cause at the moment, they were called as the first two pilgrims from Iran. After a long period, nearly 10 years, there were no pilgrims coming from Iran or from anywhere else to the Holy Land. Then the door of pilgrimage opened in the early 50s, and these two Persian gentlemen were the first that came from Iran. Well, they had gone and talked to Mr. Furatan and other friends who had been there in the 30s and knew the Guardian and so on. Mr. Qazi was worried. He says, I was a veterinarian, I was a bit of a rough kind of country type of man. He said, you know, all kinds of thoughts came into my head anytime. I didn't have a control of what I was thinking. And people said that the Guardian read your thoughts. And he said, I was really worried about going there and what would happen. So they said, no, you trust in God and you go. And Shoghi Effendi's so loving, so don't worry about it. So he came on pilgrimage. He told us he came on pilgrimage. And the first day that the guardian came up to the pilgrim house, he walked with Mr. Khadim and Mr. Qazi. They went to the shrine of the Bab. Now, Mr. Khadim's story of that day is quite interesting, and it focuses on other things than Mr. Qazi. But Mr. Qazi said, we went, and finally Shoghi Effendi took us to the shrine of the Bab, and we went in together, and Shoghi Effendi went forward to the tablet of visitation, and he chanted the tablet of visitation. Now imagine the sign of God, you're going in the shrine, and the sign of God is chanting the tablet of visitation. Talk about how to get a connection. So there they are, and Shoghi Effendi then, with all humility, prostrated himself at the threshold. And then out of reverence to the shrine, he stood and he backed up and he started back. He said, we were standing both of us in the back, but on each side. So Shoghi Effendi was coming between us. So we looked at each other in horror. What do we do? Do we face the threshold or do we face the sign of God? And so he said, we didn't know what to do. We kind of looked at each other, and Mr. Qazi was a portly man, a big man. He said, we halved it, half to the threshold and half to the guardian. And the guardian went passed out, and he went to the outside, and he put on his shoes, and we went forward then to the threshold and prayed. And then we came out, and as we were putting our shoes on, Shoghi Effendi was pacing back and forth, and he said, then he spoke, and he said, the station of the shrine is very great, he said. He said, the friends don't understand the station of the shrine. He said, we knew which friends he was talking about. That was clear. Then he started extolling the shrine, the greatness of the shrine. And he said, that this blessed, the king of the messengers of God, this most exalted being, His Holiness the Bab, is there, buried here. And he said, the supreme concourse, all the messengers of God, the prophets and martyrs of the past, are circling around this blessed place. Mr. Qazi heard that, and the first thing that came in his mind, he said, my goodness, he said, what's left for Baha'u'llah if everybody's here with the Bab? Shoghi Effendi was walking in front. He said, I was walking behind. And Shoghi Effendi stopped. Mr. Qazi said, I knew why he stopped. And he turned around, and he looked right at me, and he smiled. And he said, and then he said, the Bab and all those that circle around him circle around Baji. So these spatial problems are not so important in the next world as they are to us. I mentioned about you can study the historic accounts of Muhammad and also of the prophet Enoch moving through these various stages of the invisible realm, the different worlds, each one dominated by one of the prophets of God. And Muhammad then finally reaches the supreme apex, the very top, and he beholds there the tree beyond which there is no passing, this Sadrat al-Muntaha. And he says, out of that comes the voice of the glory of God behind 70,000 veils of light, announcing, welcoming Muhammad and speaking to him. So this is the highest heaven. This is the station of the supreme manifestation that we know with Baha'u'llah's coming. Very transcendent, beyond anything we can imagine, obviously. How are we doing here? Let's see. Did I leave anything out that I can include? There's one very interesting passage from a letter of Shoghi Effendi to the East, Nowruz 108. And he refers to the other world, and he refers to a series of levels of beings, of which there are 8 that I have in this list. And it starts with the concourse on high. He talks about the concourse high, and beyond them the inmates of the holy sanctuary. and beyond them the cherubim of the supreme paradise, and then the maids of heaven in the kingdom on high, and finally the company of the prophets and messengers in the divine realm. And then the branch of Baha seated on the right of the mighty throne. This, of course, would be Abdu'l-Baha. And then the primal point seated before the throne in the midmost heart of the celestial heights, the blessed Bab. And finally, the ancient sovereign himself seated on his throne of glory in his most luminous Abha kingdom. What kind of guardian did we have, friends, that could describe these things? Yesterday I mentioned, he talks about the concourse rushing out with chalices of light to greet the teachers and such. He's obviously seeing something that we don't see, you know. He also, in his messages to the East, he says that, you know, the Baha'u'llah, the Blessed Beauty, and the Bab, and the Master are looking down upon you from on high and applauding your actions and your services in this world, in the service of the faith. They're constantly watching to see what we're doing and encouraging us and ready to confirm us, okay? Then he says, in another place he says, Baha'u'llah in this moment is extolling your services with these words. Then he quotes from Baha'u'llah from the other world during the formative age about the actions of the friends and the praise of God for them. Extraordinary. I think we have a lot to learn about the guardian in the future as we think about that. And I must say the House of Justice has begun a survey of the guardian's writings in Persian to create a volume translated to English of some of the major portions. Of course, they're parallel to the things we have in the West, but between the two, you get an even more extensive, exalted vision of what he's talking about. All right, friends, I think I'll go to the question, some of your questions that you asked yesterday. We'll go on with this subject of immortality in the next session. This one says, I've read in the writings that dreams should not be interpreted by individuals unless the individual has a pure soul. Do you have any thoughts on this? We are all imperfect, and therefore no one is completely pure. When can dreams be interpreted with this in mind? And then they apologize for a confusing question. Nothing very confusing about the question. The answer is difficult, but fortunately we have Shoghi Effendi's response to someone who said, can I trust the interpretation or the visions that I have in dreams? I receive guidance in dreams. Should I trust this vision or not? And Shoghi Effendi says that one does. It's quite possible to receive guidance in dreams, but that one should compare whatever the guidance is in the dream to the writings of the faith. But the main channel of guidance are the verses of God. Otherwise, God could have inspired us all with dreams, and that would have been the finish. We didn't have to publish books or anything. But that isn't the case. He's given us texts to guide us. So you check your dream against the text. And if the dream is telling you do something that's not in accordance with the text, then don't do it. If it fits in with the text, okay, you can consider and weigh and see what you want to do about it. He said the reason that we can't trust the guidance we can trust, but we can't trust our understanding of the guidance, is because our consciousness is inhabited by prejudices, and it warps and distorts the guidance coming to us in dreams, so that we make out of it what our willful lower nature wants to make out of it. And that's the problem with thinking that we've been guided in such a way in a dream when not necessarily that's the case. So here we have consciousness not in its pure state. Now they're asking who's pure enough to completely interpret the dreams. Yesterday, we talked about symbolic dreams. There's some symbolic dreams. Those things you can check with people what they think, what do they understand by the dream. They're not clear. They're in the form of symbolic events. That's one kind of dream. But the dream where you actually guidance, like you should pioneer with your sister's husband to Africa. It's a little bit of a combination of the wrong kind of. I'd really like to run away with him, but I don't think this is a good idea. So you can see from the writings this doesn't fit in. The pioneer part may be just fine. So you have to figure out what you're making out of the guidance that you're getting. The other thing in this letter, it's written way back in the 1920s. He says is this guidance comes to the souls when they're awake as well as when they're asleep. But for the most part, we're so far away from that emanation of divine power that's the center of our being, that's the presence of God in our existence, that we don't feel it. Now there's some souls who are able then to detach themselves sufficiently from the world that more and more they receive this inner light of inspiration and guidance. And Shoghi Effendi told May Maxwell, he said that the teachers that serve the most, draw closer to God, they act in mysterious ways. And sometimes you don't understand exactly why you're being compelled to do something. And yet you have to trust in it if it's not going to harm anybody. There's a lovely story of a teacher in England. This woman, 3 years ago, she had been searching different religions and reading different writings. She was confused and she didn't find anything that satisfied her soul, and she knew there must be something, but she didn't know where was the truth. So one evening she said, "Okay, God, I have searched and searched and I didn't find anything. 3 days, I'll give you 3 days to lead me to the truth. Otherwise, I'm not going to search anymore." Well, that's pretty bold in itself, but she went through 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, put her pajamas on, got in bed, and that was the end. It was supposed to be the end of it. Only she couldn't go to sleep. She kept waking up, and she's wide awake. She says, "This is ridiculous. I'm wasting my time here lying in bed. I can't sleep. I'm not sleepy. Okay, I'm going to get up and go to she was on a campus. I'm going to this email room and send some emails until I get sleepy." So she got up and did that. Meanwhile, our poor Baha'i friend on the other side of the campus is watching television, trying to enjoy himself, but he cannot get out of his mind that he has to go and send the emails. But he doesn't know what emails he has to send, but he's got this email thing in his head. He said, "I can't get..." And he goes to the nearest email station where he is, which isn't the email station where our friend is. So he's there, and he's sitting there, and he can't, and he feels compelled to go to this other place to send the email. And, from a rational point of view, what's the point of that? Why am I being pushed around like this? Anyway, he gets up, and he goes to the other email thing, and she's at one end of the room, and he's at the other end of the room, and he's typing. And suddenly he says, I find myself asking her, "Excuse me, are you a Baha'i?" And that started the conversation, and our lady friend is there, very active in the faith now, and she says within the 3 days, she got the truth. But sometimes he has to move us around that way. Now, what if we say, no, I'm going to watch my TV program. I'm not doing this other thing. We have to at least be receptive. This is what I was saying the other day. Help me to meet receptive souls, and help me to know where and when to meet them, and realize that these are receptive souls, waiting souls, so to speak. Got some more? Oh, gracious. Okay, we'll just save these for the committee for next year, I think. Hold on just a second here. What time does this session finish? I don't want to start some long-winded answer that I can't finish, 10:45, okay. You have referred to the idea that we make errors, we fall down, and then our duty is to get up, get back up. You refer to God as the ever-forgiving and as all-forgiving. If this is so, what is the function and position of remorse and guilt in our lives? Is there any personal way of paying penance? Paying penance reminds me of Baha'u'llah has introduced a law where those sexual misdeeds will be covered by a fine. If you pay the fine, okay. That sounds simple enough. Only Abdul Baha says the part it doesn't say there is that the list of payments will be published by the local assembly with your name. So so-and-so is now paying a triple fine for his indiscretions. Interestingly enough, friends, the House of Justice, when it was reviewing and preparing the Kitab-i-Aqdas for publication, found clear reference from the Guardian that that law refers to adultery not amongst marriage, but just amongst anybody, that the punishments for adultery for married people will have to be looked at by the House of Justice in the future. But this is just any sexual. This problem is there's a word in Arabic that covers both, and there's no simple way to refer to it. But it refers to all non-marital sexual activity, relations, and so on. I think that Shoghi Effendi refers in it, he's translated these passages about asking for forgiveness, and of course remorse. Guilt, I don't know how useful that is. It's good in the sense that it moves us towards repentance. Where we repent, we actually are sorrowful and mournful about our mistakes before God, and we ask for Him to forgive us. But it's to that degree that it's important, that it moves us towards repentance and asking for forgiveness. Not that we sit and wallow in our guilt forever and ever, and that is not, that just aborts the whole purpose of existence. So we have to try to overcome it. Obviously, we're trying to be struggle. We shouldn't get ourselves in difficulties where we have to be remorseful or guilty. But you remember the phrase it's cited from Islam in some answered questions, where he says that the good deeds of the faithful are the sins of the near ones. Implying that as we grow spiritually, the line comes up about what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable. And so when you have clear spiritual vision, some actions will be seen to be not so bad if it was amongst the mass of the people, but you're the member of the local assembly, or you're a teacher guiding other souls or something. It has another level of criterion and discretion that has to be looked at. And I suppose there then the measure of repentance has to be greater. I think it is the Glad Tidings number 13 in the Tablet of the Glad Tidings, in the tablets of Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah says that when the soul is in a detached state, it should pray for the forgiveness of its sins. And he gives a prayer there for it. He's actually prescribed a prayer. And he says nobody should confess their shortcomings and sins to another human being. We know the prohibition against confession in the faith. But he should confess to God and recognize his shortcomings before his Maker. And then he has this prayer to say. And it invokes the blood of the martyrs and asks for forgiveness for our parents. It's a marvelous prayer. If you haven't run across it, you should look it up. And if it's not 13, it's 9, but I think it's 13. Not having it in front of me here. This question is about deja vu. He says, I experience deja vu every so often. It's a distinct episode, and I know exactly what's about to happen, what's about to be said, and so on. I feel as if it's repeating something from the past, and so on. Asks, is this the same thing as what, or similar to what Abdu'l-Baha says regarding the dream world, in which 10 years pass and we find ourselves experiencing what we experienced in our dream? I haven't seen any clear explanation of this. It seems to have some parallel to dream existence. Maybe it's a dream we've had which we don't remember anymore. But at the time it happens, we feel like we've seen this before. We've been here before. The situation of the furniture, everything, it matches exact. I mean, just a momentary. It's a very interesting thing. It's part of the processes of the soul, apparently, but I haven't seen anything in the writings to explain it. Acceptance of Baha'u'llah is the foremost duty. Will there come a time when Baha'is will tell non-Baha'is that they will not go to the kingdom if they don't believe? What will be the non-believer's station and place in the afterlife? Well, there's such a thing as wisdom in teaching. But on the other hand, you should know what the teachings are. Not everything a man knows is it timely to say. But there's a passage here in what I was preparing. Abdu'l-Baha says, no one who doesn't accept Baha'u'llah will go to the Abha kingdom. The Abha kingdom is only for believers in Baha'u'llah. And yet the other world has many stages and processes of developing souls, but there's a terrific advantage in having recognized the manifestation of God in its day as an honor. It's accompanied by eternal sovereignty. You don't want to abort it or walk away from it. It's a very, very precious gift that God has given you. None of us know why we've been selected to be receptive to the faith and others aren't. We don't understand how that works. But this grows as a groundswell in the world that more and more souls will come to understand it. And once it's the accepted norm, and once just the way most people are now Christians, most people will become Baha'is, the distinction will be lessened. What's still important, to realize that a messenger of God has come from God. He has addressed our souls. He's addressed us with a whole plan for peace on the planet, for world order, for divine civilization. We just beginning to explore the implications of that and the service to mankind that we can offer, and the offering of the message is important. But what people do about it, that rests with them. So I don't suggest you tell them you'll never get to the kingdom without my message, but if you should realize the importance of preparing yourself and presenting the message in such a way that you don't confuse the person who's getting it from you, or your own personality doesn't become an obstacle to them. Again, the non-believer has an opportunity. Even those who have refused, they can be assisted through prayers and the deeds done on their behalf in this world. We'll read some quotations about that a little later. Can someone accept Baha'u'llah in the next world? Absolutely. We saw some of these quotations that when you enter the next world, you have an opportunity. Shoghi Effendi says, for the soul has an opportunity who hasn't heard to recognize it, and if they've lived according to the teachings of a previous manifestation of God, tried to follow Christian law or Jewish law or Muslim law, they will be in a position to observe the light. Now, whether they recognize the light or they don't recognize the light, that's like the problem of this world. But it's more obvious there. But we don't know enough about it to know just how that works, but opportunity is there for sure. That's part of the mercy of God and the justice of God. Someone asked about the fifth mode of revelation. We talked about 4, 5. The fifth is all of the 4 previous modes, but this time in the Persian language rather than in Arabic. I've had some difficulty understanding the three stages of revelation described in the Kitab-i-Gan. Could you elaborate on the universal, specific, and secondary revelations of God? Gracious Lord. I think if you look at the book and you meditate, you're going to come up with the answer. But the universal revelation of God, as I understand it, this tajalli am, it's universal in the sense it's always present. It's the bounty of God that sustains existence. So there's nothing about the coming and going of it, because the whole argument in the Gan is that it is said that in the last day we will attain to the presence of God in the day of judgment. So the question is, what is attaining to the presence of God signify? If it means attaining to this universal revelation of God, we've already all had it. It surrounds us, insensitive as we may be to its presence and its influence. It's the sustaining force of our existence. The second stage of revelation, what Baha'u'llah refers to as the specific revelation of God, is something that was postulated by the Sufis to take place within the self of God itself. That is, the love that God has for his own being. And he says, obviously from that description, that's not something where we're going to enter in and attain the presence of God in the level of divinity itself. He says the third possibility is the secondary revelation of God. The secondary revelation of God is the revelation that God sends through the manifestation of God into the worlds of existence. And that's where we have access to God. And he says the meaning of attaining to the presence of God is attaining to the manifestation of God in his day and to his teachings and embracing those. So it's kind of a brief summary, but that if you look back at it, I think you'll see how that works. What about angels? Angels. It says angels, but I think they mean angels. Yesterday we talked about different grades of angels in the realms of existence. And maybe after this was written, we referred to that. I hope that it a bit covers it. There's those that are surrounding, the seat of truth in thy presence. One of the prayers asks that we have a seat of truth in the presence of God, which would be being a part of the court of Baha'u'llah, the intimate court of Baha'u'llah. Then those who circle around his palace and his station. And there's all these different degrees of closeness and proximity in the next world. And the angels, some of the angels are assigned just to praise God. Their whole existence, they're consumed with the witnessing of God and the praising of God. And that is the light appearing in the manifestation of God in the worlds to come, because we're told that we don't attaining to God in the next world is not attaining to the essence of God, because obviously that's beyond even the capacity of the manifestations. But attaining to the presence of the manifestation of God in the next world is the equivalent of seeing the face of God and approaching him. Asked to explain the hidden word, love me that I may love thee. If thou lovest me not, my love can in no wise reach thee. Know this, O servant. If God's love is like the sun, wouldn't that love shine on all? What do you think? It does shine on all, but your inner reality is like a mirror, and it may be in need of dusting up or some spray cleaning or something that will help clear it away so you can feel the light of that sun. But surely everybody has the capacity to feel that and to recognize it. And in one place in the writings it says that, how could God call on us, require us to recognize him in his manifestation if we lack the capacity to do so? Everyone has the capacity to recognize his maker. At least the beginning of that is there. The possibility, the potential to recognize. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any fairness or justice in that you would be in any way deprived for not having recognized him. Someone asked about the significance of the word say in the writings. Well, this is the say with a colon after it. It's there in many different instances. There's a few letters that explain this in the writings. Sometimes it's God or the inner being of the manifestation saying to the outer being of the manifestation, say this. And then you see it's like the words of God that the manifestation is to repeat or reveal into the world. Sometimes the outer station of the manifestation, the director of the community, so to speak, says that as you should arise and you should go forth and say. And then he gives the message that the Baha'is should be delivering to the public or to the other souls. So it has different significance. And it's always coming down and not going up. He prescribes prayers for us to say, okay, in that sense I suppose it goes up again, but it's been given to us then to repeat these affirmations. All right, here's a question. Is it okay for me as a Baha'i to not think about God? My heart and mind and my love is with Baha'u'llah, not God. Well, this is a particular way of seeing the reality of the situation. We see God through Baha'u'llah, through the light that comes through Baha'u'llah, through the verses that come through Baha'u'llah. And so in that sense, we shouldn't be thinking about God in the sense of trying to understand the essence of God, because he tells us the door is blocked. Thus far and no farther. Sadratul Muntaha is the last place. And even this furthermost position in relation to God, the manifestations, as we see, said that they stand thunderstruck, that they can't go beyond that. They understand. You do not understand the manifestation nor God with the equipment that you have in your soul. You understand the bounty of God in your soul, but not in the worlds of God. You see the effect of it in your own being. Now, the manifestation of God, it seems to me from what's stated there, my own understanding, is he understands the world of God by the way it's revealed in his own being and the powers, extensive consciousness that he has of the whole of mankind. And someone said, Mr. Linga said, he asked the guardian, what is Baha'u'llah, the universal manifestation of the whole universe? And he said, no, Baha'u'llah said that, the guardian said to him that Baha'u'llah is the universal manifestation for this planet and for its the immediate stages of the souls after they leave this planet. But that in another sense, the power with which Baha'u'llah is invested can't be limited in any way. That's a universal power that one would imagine then would be drawn on by all these universal manifestations of God in the different physical realms throughout the endless universe. There's star systems being born and dying, and it's just teeming with, the whole universe is teeming with life. And so Baha'u'llah is a relative universal manifestation for our planet and for its purposes right now. And Shoghi Effendi, almost in a jocular manner at the table, had said, and then in the future there will be universal manifestations for the solar system. This is eons away from our own time, but we see how we're reaching out and exploring and trying to reach the planets and so on. And that'll be something for the future. Don't worry about that too much right now. Just like we don't have to worry about recognizing the next manifestation. We're close enough to this one that that's not one of our problems. Well, this is really, at this point, it's not a question for me, but let me repeat it because some of you may have it and then you can ask the proper institutions. Regarding creating obstacles, The Ruhi Book 1, either Section 1 or 2, immediately addresses Baha'i laws, that the Baha'i should not drink, for example. Doesn't this create obstacles early on, and what should be our response to this abrupt black and white position so early in Book 1? Well, this person is certainly defining their own position to it. They find it abrupt and black and white position. But others may find it different, may find it a way of introducing the laws in a consultative way. We're talking about it, and I think the tutors should be able to reason people through that. Otherwise, you can write to the centers of the faith and give your views. How can spiritual assemblies move from old patterns of consulting, agenda something, utilizing resources, selling and utilizing resources, to a new culture of function within a culture of growth? How can we break away from the old patterns? How can the unity of vision be achieved when members have difficulty of understanding of the plan? Old culture and new culture. Please share some practical, logistical strategies. Wow. I think this is a process, and we're all moving through it, and I think we need to pray. We need to read the messages of the House of Justice, derive whatever guidance we can. It's certainly aware of those kinds of obstacles that are mentioned here, and how to move the Baha'is beyond them. Plumb the resources that are at hand, and those are the verses and instructions of the House of Justice, basically. I don't think I can go beyond that. I don't have any special strategy, except be open and be young, no matter how old you are. Prophecies concerning the evolution of the state of Israel and its eventual acceptance and recognition of the King of Glory. Could you help clarify what we know is to happen? Well, I wish I could. Our son is living in Israel, and I would like to have a clear vision of what's happening, but we don't know for sure. We know that we know one thing, that the whole reason for the creation of the state of Israel is a protective shell around the pearl of the kingdom that's sitting there in Haifa. There's no way that that could exist in an Arab country. And Israel has been called, the chosen people called to come there to protect and preserve this land. And in that sense, they're acting in God's name and are fortified by his confirmations. They've been through a couple of very difficult wars. If you count the numbers against them, you can't imagine how Israel could have won those wars. Impossible. But if you think that God is on their side, for some reasons that are not clear to mankind, then it makes a big difference. It isn't that we're not well-wishers of the neighbors, but this heart of the kingdom has to be preserved. In the future, they'll understand. You can't, now they don't understand. No point to tell them, and this is something for us to understand. But in the future, they will come to see the glory of the fact that they were the guardians, if you will, of the world center. The future world metropolis in Haifa. More than that, we don't know. We know the prophecies, ancient prophecies of the Bible and things that talk about the expansion of the state of Israel. The Old Testament is definitely Zionist-oriented. Pioneering. Is there some kind of importance today attached to pioneering as it was in the past? Please elaborate. I think there was a letter from the National Assembly here calling for an additional several hundred pioneers to arise and go out before the end of this plan. They had pledged, the National Assembly had offered and pledged to send out so many pioneers and so many travel teachers during this plan, and the House of Justice is expecting that they will respond to that. And now, there's something interesting about pioneering now, is that every place in the world we've got the same pattern of culture. So if you know the books and you know the study circles and you know what devotional meetings are, of course there's a diversity of expression of them in different places. But as you go to different lands, you can pretty well understand what's the pattern of Baha'i life there, community life. And that's a help. Before we went and you found a completely different kind of community you didn't know that was based on the ideas of the first pioneers that went there. I remember going to Nicaragua in 1958, and I met the first believer in the country. And she said, I'm a Baha'i, I'm not a Baha'i. I'm becoming a Baha'i, but I'm really a Baha'i. Not very helpful, but was going along the way here. Could you speak a bit about how Baha'i scholarly activity can be a force that is complementary and not contrary or apart from the 5-year plan? Yes, I think the National Assembly here has allowed for the Airfon colloquiums, and the Canadian North American Association of Baha'i Studies has a venue for presenting more scholarly-like papers and studies on the writings. Certainly we're all encouraged to study. Baha'i scholarship is not limited to academics or to scholars. Shoghi Effendi, in his definition of it, says that all Baha'is must, to the extent that they can, become Baha'i scholars. That we need to concentrate on the teachings. We need to read them. We need to think about them. The more we know, the better it is for us, in a better position we are to be able to teach the cause. So we're motivated in our study for teachings, but also the basic knowledge. The knowledge of God increases in us, then he said the love of God will increase in us. That there is successive love. The more we know, the more we love. How do you envision communities moving gradually to decentralization of core activities? Is there a middle way? I think we're addressing this in so many ways. I don't know which end of which tail to grab here. In some places, the core activities are supported in an area by neighboring communities within the same cluster. So in a sense, they're already decentralized, but they need some help to give the people confidence to move forward. Now, if we have this study circles going on, this prompts the core activities, and the more we extend the study circles to different parts of our clusters, the more manpower we'll have, so to speak, to hold devotional meetings and to attract other people to the scheme. This is preparation for entry by troops. That's the whole idea of it. The eventual having established a system whereby the masses can come to the faith, that there's a continuity to it, that it has the possibility of going on, even if there's a disruption in world affairs and we don't have the direction coming from Haifa or whatever happens, we've now got a basic pattern we can go on. We know that the calamities and difficulties will cause more people to awaken and be attracted to the cause, and we need to have a whole system to be able to draw them in and deepen them and fortify them. All right, friends, it's 11:15. We'll see you after a little bit again. Thank you.